My wife heard a skinwalker in our house last night. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs, just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken up to a sound that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat, and it kept saying, "Hello?" After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for a motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night, I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off till we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room, and the door was closed, so whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was a skinwalker, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched, or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We just got home, and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access has been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there, and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. I'm hopeful that burning some sage will keep whatever's at our house away. The skinwalker found me. Me, 28 male, and my fiance, 26 female, recently bought a house together in Greenville, Michigan. For those of you who don't know Greenville, it was a small town when I was growing up, but now it's booming. It is a ways away from any other large towns, and once you pass through it, you're basically in state lands. The other night we were getting ready for bed with our dog, Grizzly. I had to work the next morning at 6 a.m., so I went to bed around 10 p.m. She stayed up working on her homework. As soon as I laid down, my dog started barking at me. My fiance came into the room, put him on a lead, and took him outside. I started to fall asleep. Not 30 minutes later, he starts to bark again. This time, I get up and take him outside. He doesn't poop or pee, he just stares off into the woods. After 10 minutes or so, I went back to bed. I woke up multiple times throughout the night, having this strong feeling of dread. I had this feeling that someone or something was walking around my house and stalking it, as if it wanted to get inside. Midnight came, and she was finally laying in bed with me. Not 10 minutes into us laying down, and Grizzly is barking again. We yell at him to shut up, which doesn't work. He doesn't speak English. So fiance gets up and is gone for 30 minutes. She comes back crying. I asked her what is wrong, and she said, "Everything is fine," and went to bed. He started to bark within 30 seconds of her laying down. Naturally, I am annoyed and pissed off because my dog is being a brat. I get up and I tell him to stop barking and put him on a lead. Take him outside again. He stares off into the woods and pees. As we were outside, I look into the woods with the flashlight I brought with me. Behind my house is an unfenced backyard. I have 2 neighbors on either side, and a neighbor diagonal to my right. Behind me and diagonal to my left is all trees and woods that are not very large, but maybe 3 square miles. I am scanning the woods, knowing that there are coyotes, raccoons, foxes, etc. in there. As I scanned, I saw a deer. Spooked me, but I didn't really think much of it until it started to stand on its hind legs. As soon as it did that, my dog immediately started to walk towards the back door to get back inside the house. I froze for a second and gained my composure and walked to the door and got inside. As I got inside again, he starts to bark again. This time I ignore him, for I have to be up in 4 hours for work. He eventually settles down and goes to bed. I woke up at 5 with 1.5 hours of sleep, and I called into work. My drive is a good 40 minutes. I knew if I went, I was gonna fall asleep at the wheel. I stayed home that day. My fiancé got up and left for work at 8. Later in the evening, as she is telling me about her day, she tells me that I left the back slider door unlocked last night. As she said that, my eyes widened and I kind of lost my breath. I told her I was sorry, like it was no big deal, but I was freaking out on the inside. Then she brings up Grizzly and says, "He was growling so much last night. I was so scared. I cuddled you a little harder last night." I asked her why she was scared, and she said she had this feeling that something was in the giraffe room. We call it that 'cause it has a glass table, but the legs are all giraffes. Like something evil. The thing was in my house. I went to go into the room later on, and it smelled terrible, like something took dog poop, dried blood, and rotten food, left it in the sun for a few hours, and threw it in that room. The smell is gone now, and I don't have the heart to tell my fiancé what I saw. The Skinwalkers of Wisconsin. It was a weekend. I was out hunting in the northern forests of Wisconsin. I was walking through the woods. It was near dark when I came across a clearing. It couldn't have been more than 50 feet in diameter. Then I saw it, the largest buck I had ever seen. I then laid down on my stomach and pointed my rifle at its heart. The buck must have heard me, as it looked in my direction, but it didn't see me, so it went back to grazing in the field. As I pulled the trigger of my rifle, a large branch snapped behind, and I thought I saw a wolf running off beside me, causing me to flinch and miss my shot, hitting the buck in the side of the torso. As the buck let out a scream, I know I had hit something important, as its side was gushing blood. It still ran, but I knew it would die at some point soon from its wound. I just had to follow the blood as it ran. I followed the blood trail for a few minutes before coming across a much larger clearing, at least 300 feet in diameter, and I saw movement at the other end of the clearing. Thinking it was the buck, I got back onto my stomach and chest and aimed my scope at the movement to see what it was. Seeing a wolf eating the buck. I was disappointed the wolf had killed the buck before I could, but I just watched it in awe by the cruelty yet beauty of nature. But then I saw something. Was that a hand where the wolf's paw should be? No, it couldn't be. It must just be a scratch from the wolf. But did it have human teeth? I shifted a bit in my spot to try and see better. Snapping a twig. There's no way the wolf could have heard me, but its head then snapped up to me on the small raised plateau I was on. It looked like it had human eyes, and it looked like it smiled at me, and it then stood up on its hind legs, still looking at me, deer's throat gripped in its long-fingered hand. This scared me so much I dropped my rifle, and in the second it took me to look down and grab my rifle again, the wolf was already halfway across the clearing. There was no way it could have gotten there that fast. As I looked back up at it, it stopped running, still looking at me. "What the fuck?" I whispered under my breath, terrified. I stayed where I was and stood up with my rifle aimed at it, still looking at the wolf. There was no way it could be a wolf. But the one thing I've learned from my 16 years of hunting and camping: never turn your back on and run from a predator that was hunting you. The wolf then opened its mouth like it was yawning, but it then let out a scream that sounded part human scream, part howl, and part animalistic screech, as it then looked like the wolf frowned at me like it was disappointed in me standing my ground, before walking back to the deer and crouching down before continuing to eat it. As I then turned and ran for at least an hour back to my car, that horrifying scream playing in my head on repeat before I practically dived into my car. It was the happiest I'd ever been to see that old piece of shit in my entire life. As I then drove home, I didn't turn the radio on. I just drove in silence. When I got home, I just cried in my car from fear of what had happened and joy from finally being safe for at least 5 minutes before finally getting out of my car and running into my house, locking every door and window and pulling every curtain shut. If you ever go hunting in the woods of northern Wisconsin, do not stay if you come across a wolf eating. Those things don't like it when you stare. A skinwalker is knocking on my door. I am writing this now as a call for help. I am desperate and I don't know what to do. My name is Michael. I own a dairy farm in the Great Plains near a Navajo reservation along with my brother. The farm was built by our parents before we were born, and it was passed down to us after their death. It's a pretty big farm. It has 2 barns, a well, and a house, where we spend most of our free time, although I've always dreaded this place because it's the place where our parents died, or at least where they were found. My parents died when we were both 19. Their bodies were found mutilated in the well. There was nothing stolen or destroyed. If not for the blood trail leading to the well, we would have never found them. The case was passed as a murder, but they never had any suspects, and me and my brother were too ravaged by the event to think about it. Years passed and we forgot about the event. Well, until 2 weeks ago. We were gathering food for the cows using an old tractor. It was pretty dark, but we didn't use its headlights because the battery was too old and couldn't stand them being on for very long. As I was loading up the food, I heard my mom's voice calling for me from behind some bushes. "Michael, it's been too long. Come to me." But it sounded weird, as if it was spoken through an old radio. I was terrified. I looked at my brother, and he was as white as snow. I whispered to him to turn on the headlights in the direction of the voice. What laid before our eyes made my knees weak. It was a coyote, but its eyes were pitch black, and it was standing on its back legs. I jumped in the tractor, and we noped our way out of there as fast as we could. We arrived at the house and locked the door. That's the moment when I passed out. I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought all that just happened was a dream, but then I saw my brother telling me to stay quiet and pointing his shotgun at the door. Then I heard it again. "Michael, come here, my dear." Then it started to knock softly on my door. That didn't last for very long, though. The knocking turned into banging. Then my brother started looking through the window at that thing. It realized we were looking at it, and it let out the most horrific screech I've ever heard before it ran off. An hour later, it started again. The voice and the knocking. I've searched it up on the internet, and I learned they are called skinwalkers, evil Navajo men that sold their soul. Calling their name supposedly attracts them. I hope writing it doesn't trigger them. My brother wants to go outside and face it. I'm afraid we won't see the light of day again, so please, please help us.